Talk is over. It's been a great build-up. Gervonta Tank Davis, Frank the Ghost Martin. In this video, I will give my final predictions. Stay to the end. I'm going to run through a couple of categories, rate each fighter appropriately, and then move on from there. This is your boy JG. This is the Punch Report. Let's get into it. So, it's been a great build-up. Shout out to Frank Martin. Shout out to Gervonta Tank Davis for doing what they're supposed to do to ensure that this fight does very, very well. And it will. I think if they did less, it wouldn't even matter because respect to Frank Martin, but Gervonta Tank Davis sells a lot of tickets. He puts butts in the seat. Let's get into it. I've done a couple breakdown videos on this. I've talked about pull counters and speed and power and intangibles and things of that nature. But right now I'm just going to run through a couple categories, give my final prediction as to how I see this fight playing out and the reasons why. So in the category of speed, I'm going to give the slight edge to Gervonta Tank Davis. That's no knock against Frank Martin. He's a pretty fast-handed fighter, and I think he's a fluid fighter. So it's just a slight edge there when I think about these two combatants and what they've been able to do against the opposition that they have faced. From the power perspective, I believe that this is pretty much a no-brainer. Gervonta Tank Davis does have God-tier power. The thing that makes him unique is the fact that unlike, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, unlike my man Deontay Wilder, the ability to box, counterpunch, come forward fighter, show a variety of defensive setups. Gervonta Tank Davis has the ability to do those things. And then if things get sketchy or he loses a couple rounds, he can turn your lights off in an instant. The power has to go to Gervonta Tank Davis, I think over like a 93-94% knockout ratio in comparison to one Frank Martin, who is floating around the number of 66. Frank Martin definitely has respectable pop and power. Guys that get caught on the outside of his left hand typically go down or get hurt real bad. I think that this is a unique challenge for him, definitely stepping up against Tank Davis. I know they have some experience sparring, but it looks different under the bright lights and the small gloves, and there's a lot on the line. The power advantage definitely goes to one Gervonta Tank Davis. When I go to, or I think about something like explosiveness, this is a draw. These guys are both very explosive, but for different reasons. When I think about Frank Martin, he's explosive from the perspective of the ability to close the distance so very quickly and then make you pay if you make a mistake. Just being right outside of range to on you and putting damage on you so quick, so fast, so explosive, that being Frank Martin. When I think about Gervonta Tank Davis and where his explosiveness comes from and how it differs or varies, is his ability to generate so much leverage and power from the inside fighting game perspective and put real damage on you. I think he's unique in that aspect where there's not really a lot of space to get power off. He can figure out a way to explode from awkward positions, pause, and put damage on the opposition. So it's a coin flip there as far as explosiveness is concerned. However, they vary in how they apply the explosive tangible, so to speak. The ability to close the distance from outside of range to in range, that goes with Frank Martin. The ability to generate a lot of leverage and power inside tight, exploding through certain shots and hurting guys both upstairs and downstairs, definitely goes to Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, this take might be controversial, maybe not. When I think about this aspect, and that's defense and where I rank these fighters, it's close. I'm going to give the edge to Frank Martin, but he does have something I'll discuss later in this video that concerns me going into this bout. Tank Davis's belief, one in his chin, his ability to counterpunch, and his general skill set means that he doesn't spend too much time being overly concerned about the opposition. I think he was careful against Ryan Garcia, set him up beautifully, dropped him and knocked him out. And I think he was careful against Rolando Rolly Romero, who he has stated is the toughest puncher that he's been in front of, to make sure that he didn't take too much unnecessary damage and figure out a way to set the trap and then land the left hand and get him out of there. But because of that belief in his defense, at times he wades forward. I think he gets hit with shots that he shouldn't get hit with. Like I mentioned before, against a Frank Martin, I don't know if you want to take that chance. I think that his power is respectable, not crazy one-touch type power, but not a dude you just want beating on you like that. When I think about Frank Martin, I will give him the nod defensively for one reason. I think he's really, really sound and solid with his hand exchange, his defensive hand exchange, where he doesn't make a lot of mistakes with rowing shots off the shoulder. They come off and they go back to the shoulder. He has a disciplined offhand more often than not. Where I get concerned about Frank Martin is his hand discipline is so good, he doesn't really utilize a lot of upper body movement. And if you put pressure on him and push him straight back, he tends to go back in a line. That's where you can get off to the body. See Artem Harutyunyan, he was able to do that repeatedly in that bout. Not a mistake you really want to make against Gervonta Tank Davis, though. So all that being said, gonna give the slight nod for defensive responsibility or defense overall to one Frank Martin. If you go to footwork, this is another coin flip, but I'll lean towards Frank Martin just because he uses the footwork a little bit more. He's more mobile from that perspective than a Tank Davis, who we know has it, but he doesn't typically tend to use it. He really hasn't had to use it. I think in this fight, he's going to have to be a little more thoughtful. This is a very athletic fighter. You think about Ryan Garcia, who was super fast, good explosiveness, had size as well. I don't think he is as athletic as one Frank Martin, so it provides a different wrinkle from how do you defensively assess what's happening in front of you. Like I mentioned before, they do have the shared time in the ring and sparring, but this is a different scenario and situation. Frank Martin does a better job or applies the footwork perspective of pugilism at a higher level consistently than a Tank Davis. Like I mentioned, Tank Davis may not have to do that, but I think this is one of the fights where both guys are so technically gifted. It's an insignificant thing to ponder over because it's high-level boxing, so adjustments will be made. Guys will try to figure out the best way to get to their offense while being defensively sound. I said a whole bunch of stuff. Speed, Tank, explosiveness 50-50, defensive responsibility Frank Martin, footwork, coin flip, but I'll lean towards Frank Martin. This is where I get into my final prediction for this bout, and I'm going to get into boxing specifics surrounding it along with some intangible items. I have Tank Davis winning this fight via stoppage after the 8th round, somewhere 7th, 8th, or 9th over Frank Martin. I will provide a key to victory if Frank Martin is to get this done, how he gets it done at the end of this video. The reason why I'm shading towards Tank Davis to get this done is for two reasons primarily. One of them is experience, and there's no substitute for experience. Gervonta Tank Davis has shown the ability time and time again to go into bouts, make necessary adjustments inside the ring as he's consuming the information, something I'm not a big fan of, because if you throw away rounds against guys who are really, really exceptional, and I think that could be Frank Martin or is Frank Martin, then it could spell disaster for you in the back end or lead to a questionable decision on the cards. But the ability to make adjustments and set traps, Tank Davis is operating at the top of the sport from this perspective. People can criticize his resume and say, well, who has he really fought? And is he really that great? And I totally understand that. But then I could ask the same question of a guy named Frank Martin, who has 11 less fights and definitely has a resume that pales in comparison to Tank Davis. It's head scratching as to now why there's a contingency of individuals who really believe that Frank Martin can get this done, which I'm not saying is outside the realm of possibility, but the experience of a Gervonta Tank Davis really will end up, in my opinion, carrying the day. Now, from a boxing application standpoint, the jab of Frank Martin, which is a good jab, but we know the jab serves three purposes, measure, distract, and damage. The measuring part, Frank Martin has mastered. Distracting and damaging part are the keys that he's missing. And sometimes when he double pumps that jab, it doesn't come crisp off the shoulder, but more pause at the opposition, while he uses that athleticism to close the distance and land heavy left hand. The issue with Gervonta Tank Davis is he has tremendous reflexes, boxing skill, and ability. And if the jab is not something that Tank Davis has to be super worried about, more than you just trying to close the distance, then you can get countered and stopped bad. We mentioned before, I did a video where I talked about the perceived inability of one Frank Martin to take it to the body. That may manifest this evening, especially if Frank Martin starts too far outside, overcommits with that jab, a lot of weight in the lead foot, and Gervonta Tank Davis can counter to the body, slowing momentum and then setting up something upstairs to potentially get a stoppage. To recap that, I think the experience and I think the limited use of the jab from an ability beyond setting up the left hand for Frank Martin will get in trouble because of these few things. Gervonta Tank Davis can punch, he can box. If you look at the Rolly fight, he can set you up in traps, hit you with the left hand over the top. If you look at the Luis Garcia fight, he can stand in the pocket, catch and shoot, roll shots, and counter you and punch you to the point where you can't see out one of your eyes. His ability to provide and show different looks defensively put you in a position to start to overthink and have that cognitive overload. And I think we've seen a little bit of that in the lead up from Frank Martin. I don't like when guys break character for the purposes of selling a fight. And I'm not calling Frank Martin a fake tough guy, but I think it's easier for your mental preparation to just kind of stay in your operational lane and don't try to go the route of someone like a Tank Davis, who's shown the tremendous ability to promote, talk shit, get a little crazy in a weigh-in or the lead up to a bout. Because then you have to process all that. You have to come down emotionally while going into a bout that's the biggest of your career and trying to apply your skill set against one of the best guys in the world, that being Tank Davis, if you're operating from the Frank Martin perspective. To me, you would think that having Derrick James in the corner, one, is already going to be an added bonus. But you've seen Tank Davis in the Ryan Garcia fight. You did not have success there, but that experience is invaluable. I don't know if there's enough time available with the lack of experience of a Frank Martin to apply the teachings of a Derrick James to find success against a Gervonta Tank Davis. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not likely. When I think about what could Frank Martin do in this fight to ensure victory, come out, start fast, risk it. You got to put a lot of pressure on Tank Davis, knowing that he's a highly effective counterpuncher and can hurt you bad, but you got to pressure him and you got to take stuff away. That's how Frank Martin gets this done. If he tries to play cute and box too much on the outside, I think he loses and loses bad. I think that if he allows Tank Davis to walk him down and pressure him, an area where I think Frank Martin doesn't do too well, which is fighting off the back foot, I think then he gets brutally stopped. Ultimately, how can Frank Martin find his way to the victory line in first place, getting the victory and scoring a massive upset, almost a 700 or a minus 700 dog, or excuse me, Davis is plus minus 700. So, Frank Martin's rated a pretty heavy dog. How does he find success? He starts fast and he doesn't take his foot off the gas and he takes risks, but he has volume coming from his hands. He gets on those angles like he does beautifully offensively and just creates complexities defensively for Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, the only issue with that is it's rumored that the weight cut was hard on him. Tank Davis said he looked bad up there on the scale. That could be skullduggery. But in order to execute the plan that I'm mentioning right now, that means you have to be able to hold up over the course of maybe 12 rounds. Does Frank Martin have that kind of conditioning? That's the way that he gets this done. Start fast, finish fast. My final prediction, as I mentioned before, Gervonta Tank Davis, 7th, 8th, or 9th by stoppage. I think it'll be a great fight. If it goes the distance and Frank Martin starts strong, that's his best opportunity for victory. Let me know what you guys think. This is your boy JG. This is the Punch Report. We out.